Maybe. Anyway, let's record.
Yeah. All right. Hello and welcome to... oh, go on.
No. I was just gonna say it. I didn't realize it was 5:30. So let's crack on.
Yeah, we gotta go.
Because I'm definitely gonna need a shower before going to mum and dad's because it's fucking sweaty.
Gotcha. Well, we gotta get moving. So one way to be quicker would be to not interrupt the intro, but there you go.
Yeah, sure, no worries.
Hello and welcome to Nothing.
The thing is, once you make a suggestion, you know I'm going to do it, and then we're just stuck in this sort of...
And also, I don't know if you noticed, but I was too busy waiting for you to interrupt that I didn't even do the real intro. I started saying welcome to Nothing But Static, because I knew you were going to interrupt and it was dead anyway. Oh dear. Right, we'll try again. We spend too much time talking to each other. That's the issue. We're in each other's brains in a way that is probably not healthy. All right, let's try this again.
Yeah, that's true.
Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. We are, of course, taking a look at Coronation, or The Coronation, I should say, which is, of course, episode 3 of Book 4, Balance. How are we doing, Chris? How are we feeling about Korra and the word balance? Are we going to work that into more sentences this week?
We can give it a try. Yeah. Why not? We can balance it out.
He said the thing. Yeah.
I did. I'm feeling good. You know what? It's really tricky, isn't it? Because I worry sometimes that positivity with Korra can sound negative, in the sense that this is a classic example of really enjoyed that episode. Lots of interesting stuff. Lots of cool scenes. Great. Would almost rather just be, watching the next one instead of having to analyse it for an hour because it's just it's just solid TV. It's not necessarily, you know what I mean? I don't know if I've got 40 minutes of critiques to say, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's really, this season so far has been really good quality. I enjoyed the two stories coming together this week and seeing both. Seeing what our pals are up to, what Korra was up to. I thought if you actually break it down and think about the number of characters we saw this week, then the balance, all joking aside, the balance is really well done. Nothing feels underserved. Everything feels very served. Toph was very well written and voiced, and feels very much like Toph. Sorry. Bit of intrigue at the end, 2 slices of intrigue. One, obviously, the kids going after Korra, and 2, the technology or whatever's being created to change everything. Those things make me go, "Ooh, I'm excited to see them try and find Korra. Ooh, I'm excited to see what this technology is." It's good. It's a good, solid Korra. But I just worry that sounds negative, because I don't think there's necessarily anything to be like, this was groundbreaking, but it doesn't, need to be. The job of the show is to make me go, ooh, that's intriguing. Let's watch the next one. So, when you say, what did I think of Korra? I say, it's intriguing. Let's watch the next one.
Yeah, I think this one,
you say, but Chris, we've committed to a podcast. We've got to talk about it for another hour. And I go, okay.
And then we do that anyway. We make it work. No, I think, well, first of all, actually, what I would say, the thing I always say when you make that point, because you have made that point, that's come up so many times now that I feel like I need to, ring a bell when you start a podcast with this point, because, I remember it was last season, I think the first 3, maybe 4 episodes, you said almost the same thing, which is I don't even know what we're going to talk about this week. And I think that there's an element of, sometimes we watch the episode right before we record, and we haven't let it sit with us long enough to have had any deeper thoughts about it, and I think that is sometimes to our detriment, because I had the benefit this time, and not by choice, just I couldn't have watched it before we recorded today because I was working. Chris couldn't have watched it in advance because of his plans the previous day. So these are just the way these things go. But I watched this yesterday from my perspective. Obviously, Chris and I now being in separate time zones, we have different situations. And I had a similar feeling when I finished watching the episode. I was like, yeah, it was, a lot of, moving the plot forward, but like not a huge amount to sort of dissect, so to speak. But actually, as time passed and I thought about it, there are actually two big things I wanted to get into this week about this episode. One relates to a potential contradiction in the characterization of Korra that I'm not sure I think is a contradiction, or if it is, it's one of those... So they say in writing sometimes you intentionally have to give a character an internal contradiction because that's actually a representation of the struggle they're having, the conflict they're experiencing. So we'll come back to that. And the other element is obviously the political side of this, because I think what's really interesting, and I don't know if it's deliberate, is we have two sides of a coin that both seem shit, right? Because Kuvira is a sort of militaristic like dictator that's taken a nation by force, and Prince Wu is clearly incapable of leading anything or anyone, and I don't think having someone installed as your king with advisors from elsewhere is going to go down well with anyone. So I don't think either situation is ideal, politically speaking, and I don't know what the show's statement is going to be on that. So there's definitely stuff to pull apart, because I think there's two quite interesting things there. But let's start with the overall stuff, I think, and let's get into some of the deep stuff a little bit later, because I don't even think I've had I think I've made the mistake of not starting with a quick recap. So for those who haven't seen this episode in a little while, this is the Coronation episode. This is the episode where we have two main plots. Plot A is Korra being trained by Toph to try and get her, and I'm borrowing this quote from the intro guy, her Avatar mojo back. Whatever that means. Yeah, I found that just as disconcerting as you did, dear listener. So she's being trained by Toph, who is being her trademark sort of difficult level of like training, but she's just basically using it as an excuse to beat up the Avatar, which is fun. And she missed, apparently. She enjoyed that. So there's that element of it, and then as we're doing that, we discover a little bit about Korra. We also learn something about Korra might still have some metal in her, which I also want to pick up on, because I was mixed on how I felt about that. The idea that there's still a physical problem, because I liked the idea it was more in Korra's head than a physical barrier, but we'll come back to that too. Then on the other side of things, back in Republic City, we have Prince Wu, the woefully inept soon-to-be king, looking forward to his coronation day. Surprise, surprise, Kuvira announces that she will not be handing power back to Prince Wu, because... that's how the Earth Kingdom got into the state it was in the first place. An unelected official that just sort of born into it, that ran the country into the ground. And this is one of those she's got a point moments, because even though her methodology is obviously horrendous, she's obviously been basically blackmailing towns into joining her. It's easy to see how that's an easy perspective to buy into, because quite frankly, she's right. I mean, we saw the state of the Earth Kingdom, both under the previous king and the more recent queen, and there was massive inequality, sorry. Massive equality would be good. We had the other one, inequality, which was very bad. Lots of people living in absolute abject poverty, while, there's an upper ring, like in Ba Sing Se, that's like, that where people were living in quite, we'll just say luxury. So neither option seems great. And the episode ends, obviously, once Kuvira basically makes her intentions known, it puts a divide through our cast, and the episode ends on a little tease that Varric, who's been working with Kuvira, has some sort of sneaky plan, some sort of sneaky science plan going on. With a plan, and of course in desperation and fear that maybe actually now Kuvira has sort of announced herself as a power of her own. Maybe they do need the Avatar as much as they've told Korra, we got this, Kuvira is helping us get the Earth Kingdom back under wraps. Kuvira has turned out to be not great, and maybe Korra is needed to bring sort of balance back and restabilize things. So Tenzin has sent his children out after Korra, which I thought was an interesting choice. So a lot going on. Where do you want to start breaking this stuff down, Chris? Because I think we've established we both enjoyed the episode.
Yeah, let's start with Korra and Toph. As a big Toph fan, how did you feel?
I mean, I cannot tell you how much I giddily sort of moved around in my seat last night. I was watching this and just yes, almost like fist pumping, but sort of like a half wad where my brain catches up and goes, "And I don't fist pump in real life. You can do it in your head. Have a head. Do it in your head, Dan. Imagine a fist pump." Because I loved everything they did with with Toph. I think we complimented them last year on how they wrote Zuko and how they made him still feel so much like Zuko, and they gave him that awkwardness that Zuko always sort of had in social situations, which is really fun. Toph, they did not miss a beat. What an incredible characterization of Toph that they've got here that is just so on point. I've not looked who wrote this one. Oh man, Melchior Zaya? Apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. Oh, that's the director. Sorry, who wrote it? Tim Hendrick. There you go, Tim Hedrick. Tim Hedrick wrote it. So, they did a really good job, I think, bringing Toph forward, but not so much she doesn't feel like Toph anymore. It was very clearly what you would get if you aged up that character in a very, very believable way. And watching her just tease and torture and wind up Korra was a delight, both in terms of those scenes were funny, but also I think it gave us an awful lot to chew on with Korra as a character. Toph had some real home truths that Korra might not have wanted to hear, and we'll get more into that in a bit because I really want to try and break down if I think there's a contradiction somewhere in there with Korra, but we'll come to that. I liked watching her Toph kick Korra's ass a lot and then make jokes about it. I enjoyed it. I think this is a really great line where she said, "You are by far the worst Avatar I've ever fought." And admittedly, I've only fought one other Avatar, but still. That's great. I just wrote down 1,000 different lines from Toph, the one where she says, "Oh, I'm glad you're here. I mean, it's the only people I've had to fight are the swamp benders, and they really can't take a punch." Just so much great. I never knew how much I missed tormenting the Avatar. Imagine me in my prime, I'd have destroyed you. When she says that Sue and Lin never really picked up metal bending that well, in her opinion, I mean, all of that stuff was just brilliant. 100% top tier writing. So yeah, I was delighted to see Toph back and in her most Toffiness. They really did lean into it and get it just right. So how did you feel about them bringing her back?
Yeah, I agree. I thought it felt, and obviously it's been a while now since we've seen the original, but I thought they did a great job of characterizing her, but also, it doesn't feel the whole, at the end where she's like, well, if you wanted to go somewhere where there was no one around or whatever it is, you come to the right place. But it doesn't feel, like they're being too cliche or obvious with the, character disappears into the swamp. like we said last week, always almost Star Wars-esque. Someone's got to disappear and think for a while, and then, even though that's very Jedi, people criticize it like it's somehow not, even though it's exactly what happened in the original. But there we go. I thought it was great. I thought she was really funny, but also I like the fact that she was also teaching her something. I didn't love there's a physical explanation for this as well. I prefer the notion that it was in her head a bit, and this was more about overcoming something psychologically. But equally, Toph's attitude of, well, you're a bender, you can get it out. Really entertained me. The notion of, I suppose she did try and help first and it was too painful. And to be fair, I think the defense of that point is, well, when she was actually trying to bend it out, clearly there's a psychological link because Korra's having all these flashbacks. So, there's that. But Toph's attitude of, well, get out yourself then, and just that matter-of-factness of that, I found entertaining and, like I say, true to the character.
Well, I think what's so clever about that what struck me was it made real use of Toph in this very specific scenario. Like, because there's a version of this where we trot Toph out and she says, some mean things like, I kicked your ass. I could have kicked your ass even more in my youth or whatever. And they'd have been the same lines and they'd have been just as good. And I would have enjoyed seeing Toph regardless. But what I think really brings this home for me and makes this elevated from just, oh, I'm excited to see Toph again to, oh no, this works brilliantly, is that it fits into this story so well. Because of all of Aang's old buddies, of all of the cast of the original show, the person Korra most needed to meet in this moment was Toph. It was so clear, like almost immediately, when Toph said, "Get over yourself." That blunt, matter-of-fact, approach. She might actually be the best person to teach Korra now. Because one of Korra's bigger issues is this idea that the world needs the Avatar. And Toph being like, hey, I was a police officer for this long. I'm not anymore. Did crime stop when I was doing it? Has it, there's always going to be someone to try and do the right thing. You can't put that pressure on yourself to be everywhere, to be everything. You shouldn't phrase it exactly like this, obviously. I'm very, very much paraphrasing. But Toph's logic of you can't expect that of yourself at all times is actually exactly what Korra needed to hear. And then the home truths that we get to towards the end, which is in relation to the metal stuff. And this is where I turned, because when Toph first said there's still metal in you, that the poison is still sort of in there, I went, oh no, internally. I was like, oh, that's the worst case scenario, because she's going to remove it and then she'll be able to fight again, and that just sucks. Because if she won't grow as a character, there'll be a magic solution. I hate that. But then they did something that I could not decide if I hated even more or I thought was completely genius. So we talked a lot last week about Korra's character arc and where she is right now. And it's that she tied herself so strongly to the idea of being the Avatar and being important and the world needing her, that when the world didn't need her anymore, and she realized that she would have, potentially have to give herself up to save the Air Nation, she realized the Avatar isn't the most important thing in the world and that she's not infallible and that, that's her situation. Then she woke up after having done that, literally powerless, in a wheelchair. It had a huge psychological effect on her. This week, Toph tried to lift that metal out and implied Korra was resisting. Because actually, somewhere deep, deep down, Korra likes having the pressure lifted. As much as we've heard her complain and, make comments about that, she should be the one saving the Earth Nation, not Kuvira, all that stuff. Maybe actually there's an inherent contradiction there, because actually maybe subconsciously, or maybe even consciously, she's reveled in her new freedom. The being released of being, quote unquote, the Avatar. Being able to just walk down a street and if there's a robbery happening, not be the person that deals with it. Keep in mind, this is someone very much like when we talked about Steven Universe, that's had all this pressure put on them from a very, very young age. And it was one of the big themes of that show. Imagine finding out at the age of 4 or 5 that you're basically going to be responsible for maintaining balance across the planet. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot. I'm wondering if maybe the reason it's hurting when Toph is trying to remove the metal is because she's resisting, and Toph knows that, and Toph cuts right through the bullshit, because that's Toph's thing. She's just like, I think you're the reason that's hurting, because I think you're holding on. You're holding on to the metal. You don't want it gone. You don't want to be better, because right now you're not experiencing the same responsibility, and whether you like it or not, whether you know it or not, you're enjoying that to some degree. You're getting something out of that, that release of responsibility that you've been given. But I'm torn as to whether I think that is in direct contradiction to all the stuff that she was at least saying last week. In terms of Kuvira shouldn't be the one saving the kingdom. I should be. So I was very mixed on it at first. I think I've landed on maybe that I do like it and that it is a really interesting character beat, because it's so different to what we thought was going on with Korra. But do you see what I mean when I say it might be kind of a contradiction? I don't know. I might be waffling at this point. It might be nonsense. Who knows?
No, I think it can be both. I think it can be both things. She can be saying that, and she can mean that. but deep down, like she actually likes that the pressure is off. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, Christ, let's take relationships. Do you know what I mean? How many times can people say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm really happy. I'm in a really good place," and it's not deep down how they really feel, and they're fighting that internally. Represented here. There's so many times where someone can say something and mean it, but they also feel something contradictory. And they, I think it's absolutely. I don't think it's black or white. I don't think one has to be true and the other one isn't. I think she can mean that it shouldn't be them saving the city and that she wants it to be her. But by wants it to be her, what we actually mean is actually wants to feel like it can be her, wants to feel ready for it to be her, wants to be able to let it be her. But she's not, because there is relief that this pressure and the insanity of all she's been through has lifted a bit. So I think I think you're absolutely right in both accounts. I think it's deliberately contradictory.
Yeah, because I guess it really does recharacterize her choices. Because sort of last week I was talking about like her choice to cut her hair and change her outfit and sort of not be the Avatar as a way to just like refocus herself. Like she was, there was too much pressure on that. Like, and it was just it was practical, right? Because she didn't want to be humiliated again. Like when she went to that town and there was a robbery. But actually, I never even considered the possibility that it's not that she doesn't want to be called in to help a guy when he's being robbed, like in that situation. But actually, it wasn't about the fear of failing to save the guy from the robbery, but actually maybe not wanting to be asked to help at all. And that is a really different way to characterize that choice. But it does still track with everything we saw last week. I guess it's not contradictory in terms of her behaviors. I think that's the difference, isn't it? I think it's okay for a character to have an inconsistency sometimes when they're talking about how they feel, because people do that all the time. They say one thing, maybe they secretly or even subconsciously or consciously feel another way. But I guess it's more about the choices physically that they're making. And I think she's actually, one of the conflicts inside her, one of the struggles inside her, is her sense of obligation and duty crashing into her desire to not have the responsibility. Aang had a very different journey because he didn't want the responsibility from day one and always made that clear, and then sort of discovered that he could rise to it over time. She had the responsibility and took on the responsibility openly and wholeheartedly, and is only now feeling the pressure of it. And that's... So it's like almost not a reverse version of Aang's arc, but she's having that wobble already in it, whereas Aang didn't want it from day one. And it's totally understandable. I mean, a ridiculous thing to give to a child, that role, that pressure. It's madness. Which is why, it's such a shame the way it's so brilliant the way the show is designed, because obviously plenty of avatars didn't have the struggle that Aang or Korra's had because they were born into peace times, or war or conflict happened later in their lifetime. So it seems like Roku is the most recent Avatar that got a pretty peaceful upbringing. He obviously had a very, very tumultuous time later in his Avatar career, but he was older and wiser by the time that happened. He got to, he was born as a normal kid, got to live as a normal kid till a certain age. Then he found out he was the Avatar and he went off and trained in a pretty peaceful world, it seems. Went to the Water Tribe, went to the Earth Kingdom, blah blah blah, learned all of his different, spent time with the Air Nation, learned his craft, and then came back and then had to deal with growing conflict. But by then he was pretty complete as an Avatar goes. Both Korra and Aang had very unfortunate situations where the world needed them before they were ready, maybe you're right. Maybe it's not a contradiction at all because internal conflict is natural. There are many people that feel very conflicted about the choices they make in their own lives day to day. I guess it's that the behaviors have been consistent, which they have, even if they're now characterized slightly differently when we look back.
Yeah, I mean, a wider question. Obviously we've done podcasts on Korra, Avatar, Over the Garden Wall, Steven Universe. Is children dealing with trauma and mental health just a really popular subgenre of animation? Is it just what you're into, or is for some reason you feel you need to force me to watch shows about that theme, Dan?
A little from column A, a little from column B. I'll tell you what I think the honest answer is, if I'm being honest. I think basically any show that has children in the lead characters is going to put them in dramatic and heightened situations.
Yes, yeah.
And it would be unrealistic. Not unrealistic. You could choose to ignore that, and you could still have a perfectly fine, fun, enjoyable show. But the best storytelling gives us really good character conflict. And even in kids' TV, so if you're going to put a young character in a life-threatening or like world-changing like situation, it's gonna lead to some trauma and some issues, especially them doing it that young. I think because if you otherwise you're either completely ignoring it and the show feels a bit flat because the character is just sort of bouncing through a magical world or all these pressures without really ever feeling them, and that doesn't feel very realistic, or you're handling it. And if you're handling it, then you're hitting those same themes. I mean, even Owl House, a lot of like the Boiling Isles and the situation on that, the lead character of that show felt responsible, despite not being a quote-unquote chosen one, for helping the Boiling Isles out of a horrible situation with like a despot dictator, like all this, world-ending stuff. But she put that pressure on herself, and that's that was dealt with also. So yeah, I think there's a reason it's a theme, is because often kids shows have kids as the lead characters, and I think at a certain point you have to acknowledge that actually, probably would lead to a lot of trauma and personal issues if you had a child go through all of this. Modern kids shows just seem to be smart enough to be actually telling stories about it and making that part of the character arc, and often for different reasons and different approaches, because sometimes it's they've had the responsibility shoved onto them, sometimes it's they've chosen that responsibility. But you're right, there is often a lot of dealing with trauma. Maybe I just like seeing children suffer, Chris. Leave me alone.
Yeah, but I think also a lot of those shows, like Steven Universe, slowly unfolds that and deals with that, doesn't it? And to some degree, absolutely. I think Korra and Avatar do as well, because it becomes, it's I think the right thing to do by the characters and the audience. It's the to go right. Okay, we've seen all this stuff. Let's work out a way to address it. And so I think that makes sense. What was your other big discussion point? You said you had two. There was there was that, and is that a contradiction? And what was the other one?
And then the politics element of it. I don't know. I'm maybe concerned is the wrong word, but it just feels like they've gone for like. Okay, so normally in a show like this, you would, if there's a quote unquote political situation, and we're not talking about. I'm not trying to make this like a real world left right politics or a show having a position on that spectrum that works 1-to-1, right? But let's just strip actual like real world politics and having a perspective left and right out of this for a second. In any show where there are two people vying for power, one is generally protagonist, one is generally antagonist, right? What's happened here is we have two parties vying for power of the Earth Kingdom, and I think both are terrible options, right? And I don't know what the show is trying to do with the story where I don't want either person to win. Because I there's part of me that thinks they want me to want Prince Wu to be the guy, because he's being backed by, Tenzin and Lin and other world leaders, and Mako and like a bunch of characters that I'm on the side of. And you feel like if Korra was present, she'd probably be on the side of reinstating the status quo as well. Reinstating a king and getting things back to how they were prior to the assassination of the Queen. But this guy's useless, and they're going to prop him up with a bunch of, like... They even say it. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. It broke my brain. Oh, yeah, he doesn't know what he's doing, but we're going to surround him with our advisors. That doesn't sound good. That's a puppet. That's a figurehead. That's not a good thing. So that's one side of it. And the other side is obviously a military dictatorship. Also, I don't think I have to really explain why, but quite bad. So I'm sort of looking at this going, whoever wins, we lose. So who am I supposed to invest in for this season if there isn't really a good guy and bad guy in this? And I think both options are fucking dreadful. So that's my other point on this.
Dan.
How are you feeling about this? Because it's left me very conflicted.
Well, I mean, I think you've just summed up, both elections this year, haven't you?
Yeah. Oh, I'm not saying it's not realistic, but I'm just talking from a pure storytelling perspective. So yeah, so for listeners who are hearing this in the future, the UK is about to go into a general election, which will have occurred by the time you guys hear this, and there's a US election this year, which I don't think will have happened yet. By the time you hear this, I can't remember the exact dates, but either way, yeah, and in both elections, I would say it's there's an obvious choice.
I heard.
There is a correct choice, but both suck to degrees.
Yeah, I heard a phrase the other day. The election came up, and I heard a phrase that I'd never heard before that I thought was very entertaining, which was the guy just went, "I don't know, man. Same arse, different cheek."
Yeah,
yeah.
And I want to make it very clear that in both of those elections there is no equivalency. There is obviously one choice demonstrably worse than the other, and I think everyone should be voting for the obviously not insane, like self-destructive choice 100%. As much as it would suck to have to vote for Biden or Starmer, and I feel it. Believe me, I feel it. It's still significantly better for the future of humanity, democracy, the world to go those routes, despite not feeling like either choice is good. But dear
How is
Lord,
the best case scenario, Joe Biden? Are you really gonna make me vote? Anyway,
so I 100% no, Bo Burnham, it's a great song. But from again, stripping politics out for a second, I just don't understand.
No.
The show has two characters, right? That they want me to sort of like. It's two characters vying for power. Am I supposed to be on someone's side, or am I supposed to not be on either side? Is that interesting? Is that the choice we're making here?
I keep saying it, Dan, baby. I keep saying it in life, and I'm gonna say it here. And I blame social media for this. I think it is. I'm gonna do the rant more than I've ever done it. I think it is a legitimate problem with the world. that nuance has disappeared, and in this case, I don't think we're meant to like either of them. I think they even say that, don't they? Like I think there's at least a discussion of but your choice is like between Marco and Bolin of but your choice sucks. But your choice also sucks. Essentially, like I don't think we're meant to want one of them to win. I think it is a point of. Both of these choices are bad. Now, again, I think it is quite true to rule, although, like, various degrees of how political to get and not wanting and how political we'd want to get as well. But I think it's similar. I think there is, out of the two choices presented in this show, one is not great but slightly less harmful, potentially, than the other one. But, I think it's very deliberate, I think. And I don't know if the writers sat around a table and went, oh, well, let's make often neither choice is actually brilliant. Let's make that point, for lack of a better term, same arse, different cheek. I don't think that's particularly deliberate. I think one character's comic relief. I think, the showy guy who kicked the kid off the throne and all of that, whatever his name is, I think that character's a comic relief character. From positioning of the writers. Obviously, we're not in the room. We can't say for sure. We weren't in the room where it happened. Just to introduce another song. But I think that I don't
song,
think we're...
Thank you for putting that in my head for the rest of the day. Just want to thank you for that.
Great song. Not as good. What's your favourite? Quick fire. What's your favourite Hamilton song?
I think it's The Election of 1800.
Nice.
I think that's the one I like best in terms of just like, if I was just, okay, very quick, if we're just talking about like to like sing along to, like have as a bop, like as a song on, that one. I love the lyrics. That I think it flows really nicely. I like the singing, but I like the song itself is really, really fun. If we were going for like meaning, I'd have to have a think more than that. But in terms of just like my favorite like one, if I was just like throwing it on as a jam, so to speak, I love The Election of 1800. It's great.
Yeah, I'll go bop wise, jam wise. Like you, I'd probably have to think about it more in terms of meaning. But I'd go Wait for It. I love Wait for It.
Oh yes, yeah. Wait for It's amazing.
Wait for It. And there's a cover. I can't remember. There's a punk rock cover of it that I fucking love.
I know a lot of people go for Dear Theodosia when it comes to like the emotion, which I do love. I do absolutely love. Oh, the Schuyler Sisters is a real bop too, though. That's top tier as well. Damn.
I can't find. I'll have to dig it out. The it's not coming up on YouTube, but I've got it on Apple Music. This sort of punk cover of it. Anyway, what are they called? Anyway, so no, I think it's I don't think we're meant to like one of them, or at least, or no, so, I potentially actually I can't speak to intent of the writers. I don't think it matters that we don't like one of them. I don't think it matters that both of them are actually bad choices. I'll say that.
Interesting. So you're sort of saying like whether it was the intent to do a story about how sometimes there are no good choices, even if that's not the choice, you're sort of I guess it's really going to depend what happens when Korra steps back into this for me. Because if Korra picks a side, so to speak, and she's our protagonist, then it's going to become complicated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fair.
Because I just think we're going to be in a position where Korra is defending one and or the other of these two terrible choices. And I think either one of them doesn't seem great. And she's supposed to be the one bringing balance. And if her idea of balance is just like status quo, I don't know how I feel about that message. But then again, that's what we did last year, right? Because like it was pretty clear that that your man was right. That like what was his name? The oh my god, my brain has died. The villain from last year, Flying Baldy Flying Man. It'll come to me in a minute. It'll come to me after the podcast. That's what it'll do. But basically, when he killed the queen, we had that whole discussion of like, yeah, killing the queen is bad. Don't go murdering people, obviously. Throwing the whole city into chaos. This is a bad thing to do. You know what I mean? Like, don't do that. But at the same time, I was worried the show was sort of defending you got to stick with the status quo sometimes, which is a terrible thing to teach kids, I think, because I think we should always be striving for change and progression and doing things better. I think if something doesn't, just because something, it's that, I tell you what, this is going to be a weird reference, but it is a Kitchen Nightmares thing, that thing in Kitchen Nightmares where Gordon goes, this doesn't work, and they go, oh, we're not changing it, it's how we've always done it. And I always think, that's why your restaurant's in the fucking shit. Your refusal to change. And I think, genuinely, and not to take a life lesson from Kitchen Nightmares, but I think we could apply that to a lot of walks of our life. People's reticence to change is a bad thing. And I think that particularly comes up in politics, and how we run countries and stuff. And I think sometimes we need to be willing to move forward. Moving forward is hard. Dismantling and rebuilding systems is a long-term project. To do it in a way that is safe and doesn't destabilize a whole country or a whole economy has to be done in pieces. You can't. Do you know what I mean? You've got to kind of do it brick by brick. You can't just knock it down because that's going to cause a lot of harm. So yeah, it's a complicated situation. But I was sitting here like I was really worried that last year the show's point was status quo, and if Korra fights to preserve Prince Wu as a king, I feel like that would be what the show is kind of making a statement of. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried about it I'm worried about it from a practical storytelling perspective of, I don't know if I want either of these to essentially be on the same side with my protagonist, Korra. But then from an actual political, like, what's its statement it making, I don't want it to be advocating for status quo either. So yeah, I'm curiously optimistic.
And I don't really know. Sahir, by the way, is the name of the villain last year.
Sahir,
but
thank you. I should say.
I don't know how you get around that apart from introduce a third option, which, you know, the show could easily do.
Well,
presumably one of Toph's daughters is the obvious choice for that. But...
Yeah, because they did do that whole plot line this week where we set up that the leader of Zaofu, Suyin, Toph's other daughter, you know, could have potentially stepped up when the Earth Kingdom needed help, but she didn't want the power. She you know, didn't feel it was her place to dictate the entire Earth Kingdom, and Kuvira stepped in her stead, and this is how we've ended up in this situation, you know. And it's super interesting. It's a really interesting plot, and you're right. Maybe that is the third option. Maybe it is something like someone who didn't necessarily want the power, or maybe, I mean, honestly, okay, I don't remember how this series ends in terms of the outcome for the Earth Kingdom. I remember the individual characters' outcomes in terms of, I remember, you know, where we end up with Korra, you know, where Mako and Bolin roughly end up. I remember a lot of the characters' endings, if that makes sense. But I don't 100% remember the state we leave the world in at all, right? But if I'm pitching right now with what we've got, another potential option other than Sue stepping in is Prince Wu eventually decides, make me king, I will dissolve the kingdom, and we will run a democracy, and the people can vote for me if they want me. And we'll have a campaign, and other people who are prominent can put their case to the people of the Earth Kingdom, and they can choose. Because that would demonstrate progression. And look, democracy in the is idealistic and obviously doesn't always work the way it was, because, you know, no democracy is completely free of, like, interference and other issues. There are obviously many issues with even just doing a voting system, you know, whether you're using, depending on the voting system you're using, how influential the press can be. Obviously there's lots of different other factors that are subtle and nuanced, but my point would be that would be at least a sign of progression. An attempt at doing something fair. That's what I'd be leading us to. Having Prince Wu actually have a crisis of conscience and realize that it's not right for him to just take over. But I do not recall if that's what they do. I don't remember. I don't remember what happens to Prince Wu at all. Prince Wu could literally be, like, shot in the head next week, and I would be like, who knew? I don't remember what happens with him at all beyond this point. It's so funny to think.
Prince Wu's the sort of comic relief guy, yeah?
Yes, sorry, I should clarify, yeah. He's like a distant cousin of the Queen, so he's technically in line for the throne.
One element of these two choice things that I love is the division between Mako and Bolin. Like, I think it's a really... And it's weird, isn't it? But, like, echoes of this, you know, Korra struggling with her avatar powers and Mako and Bolin falling out because they're on different sides of a debate.
Yeah.
Like, there's shadows of this throughout all the series, and I think I don't particularly mind, but if someone were to say, this feels like we're treading on similar ground to before, I'd go, yeah, I understand that criticism. It doesn't particularly bother me, but I understand that criticism. But I really like what they're doing with Mako and Bolin. I like this, and hell, I prefer this as a reason to fall out than Korra. So I liked that scene where they fight and walk away from each other, and I like it as well because I like that, and it feels very real. It feels very brotherly. Neither of them are actually that passionate about the side they're on.
No,
neither of them like the people they're working for.
No.
Like, they're just almost kind of... I think what I like about it, actually, now that I'm sort of thinking about it as I voice it out loud, what I like about it is how real that feels. Like, they're being stubborn with each other because they're brothers, as opposed to fighting for the cause that they're on the side of, because neither of them actually particularly agree with the cause. And it's like, you know, it's so typical of brothers to fall out about something, you know, fucking stupid. You know, yeah. I still, I remember this isn't a brotherly thing, but it's kind of linked. I remember going on a 15-minute rant to a friend about an ex and mine. We had a disagreement over butter. Because they threw out the last of my butter and were like, you didn't have that much butter left, and I was like, I did. I wouldn't have put the butter dish. I'm a guy who's finishing all the butter or putting it back in the fridge. That's a very truncated version of this debate. And I spoke to my mate about it for about 15 minutes, where I just talked about this butter situation, and then I paused, and he went, I don't know, man. I think this is about more than the butter. Like, and, you know, it's this situation. You know what I mean? When two people are care about each other or in an intense situation, they're just choosing to be stubborn because of who it is and who they're against. And I really like that. I like the fact that neither of them actually feel that passionately, but they don't even particularly disagree with each other. Like, that's what's so funny about this.
100%.
How real it feels.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool about that as well is it's like when the argument ends, it's not like you don't go, well, that's you know, they're not gonna like they'll talk tomorrow. Like, they're not. Do you know what I mean? It's not one of those arguments where it's like relationship ending. It's they disagreed, they gone their separate way. Tomorrow it'll be like, hey bro, how's it going? Like, you just know that it's not going to be like an irreconcilable difference that they've got. But also, I think what's funny about this whole situation is I don't even think you need them to be brothers for that to work, because I was thinking about it, and like, I've had to have these conversations with people reasonably recently because of real world politics. Like, I've had to defend Keir Starmer. Like, do you know what I mean? Someone I do not feel particularly passionate about. Someone that in any other circumstance I would want to put in a bin. Do you know what I mean? Like, just no. You absolute neoliberal centrist piece of shit. Go in a bin, stay in the bin until you're willing to tax the rich, please. Do you know what I mean? Like, so here I am in conversations with other people going, you have to vote for Keir Starmer. It's really important that Rishi Sunak doesn't remain Prime Minister. So there's also that element of it as well, as like, you know, you're on the side you're on and you're defending the other side even though it's not that great. You know, there's also that element to that discussion. Because until this day, it felt very much like Bolin was passionately behind Kuvira and what she was doing. Because he had that debate with Opal 2 weeks ago, the first episode, you know, where he was like, no, Kuvira's doing good. And then it's this week when she had announced that she was changing the Earth Kingdom to the Earth Empire and that she wasn't giving power back, that Bolin started to feel unsure and have doubts. And I think that's what's really cool about the way this has worked out. It's like, you know, it feels like Bolin wouldn't have had those concerns, you know, otherwise. So this is our first sign that Bolin doesn't fully support what Kuvira is doing. But then he has to sort of defend her versus Prince Wu, and it's just like, yeah, it's too brothers. You're right; it's very accurate to a sibling relationship. I think, yeah, arguing over something that does not matter, or something you don't even feel that passionately about. Yeah, that's great. It's really good.
They did. I thought they did the. Which one's the more? Marco's the more. I know I do this every week. Marco's the more serious of the two, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
The episode where she comes to talk to him and is like, I need you on my side now more than ever. And you can see that he's conflicted, though, and that he doesn't know what to do. I thought that scene was done really well. I thought that was really, really good.
Oh, you mean Bolin, then? Kuvira comes and talks to Bolin.
Yeah, is Bolin not the more... Bolin's the more serious one, then, is he?
No, Marco is the more serious one.
No,
he's the one that.
Oh no, yeah, sorry, yeah, sorry, you're right, yeah. I'm getting confused.
because they found they found the comedy in teaming up Marco, the more serious one, with Prince Wu. So the comedic one, Bolin, is been with Kuvira, because that's a good combination. Because she's quite serious.
Yeah, which is so effective. I forgot in the moment, and because it is a really good twist. That, yeah, I thought that scene where she talks to him and is like, "Well, no, I need you," was really, really nicely done.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I mean, they were pretty outright with the politics this episode. I mean, I think in that debate, Marco calls Kuvira a military. I think he says she wants to establish a military dictatorship. That's the phrase he uses, and I thought that was really strong language for a kids show. Do you know what I mean? Like that. I mean, I don't know if kid Dan would have been, obviously adult Dan saw this show. I was already in my 20s when the show aired, I think. But like, if I'd have seen this when I was like 11, 12, I'd have been like, what's a dictatorship? You know, like that would have been a question I had, I think, maybe. So yeah, I thought that was pretty good. I know this show is kind of aimed a bit older than Avatar was, but I still think that was unusually strong language for the show. So I think we've hit most of the main notes. I would like to talk about a couple of quick notes I made, if that's okay. Just very quick ones. I really loved that we saw Eska return. And she thinks that Kuvira is Bolin's girlfriend, and he's like, "Oh no, she's my boss." And Eska says, "Boss, girlfriend, same thing." Mwah. That's a chef's kiss. Thank you. No notes. That's great. I loved that we revealed that Kuvira was the one that made all of Varric's, and I'm going to use the phrase he used, alleged crimes go away, so he could come back to Republic City. I thought that was very fun. I really enjoyed all the stuff we did with Prince Wu, where his coronation just kept getting shitter and shitter, because obviously all the stuff got ransacked from the original one to the point where they just gave him a brooch instead of a crown.
Well, no, they gave him an earring, which doubled up as a brooch.
Yeah, that's right. It was an earring, and they turned it into a brooch. It's so good. And then my favourite bit is how that all culminates with Prince Wu going to Little Ba Sing Se and, like, finding a restaurant that was themed after the palace. And, like, there's a kid getting to sit on the fake, like, plastic version of the throne, getting a picture taken or something. And he throws the kid off. He's like, "I want my coronation." And then he says to someone, "Respect the brooch."
Yeah.
I just want to say I loved all of that stuff. Prince Wu losing his mind was great. Very funny. I also really liked, actually, to be fair, I loved the tough love moment Mako gives him, because that really reflected what was happening with Korra and Toph, because after all of that, Mako sits him down and is like, "What did you ever do for your people? Like, actually get a grip now. Like, you can't throw a tantrum here because, you know, you hadn't earned this anyway." And I think that's a really interesting position for Mako to have taken with Wu. Maybe that'll sink in. Maybe we'll grow up. I don't know. But I thought that was a great moment. Let's see. What other notes before we move on? Oh, by the way, I really like the idea that, like, okay, I don't like the idea, obviously, but just from a like sort of like setting up essentially a villain perspective, the idea that Kuvira is turning the Earth Kingdom into the Earth Empire. I mean, the word empire has just such connotations. Threatens to crush everyone who's going to cross her. She feels real threatening right now in that sense. So yeah, well done, show, for making me fear what Kuvira might do in office. Because as much as Prince Wu is not a great option, man, that sounds real scary to me. Yeah, I would be very concerned if I lived in the world of Avatar and I heard a politician saying those kind of things. So yeah. I think everything else. Oh, Nadia pointed out, and I really wanted to talk about this. Kuvira, the military dictator that we just talked about, political figure, militaristic figure that's taking the Earth Kingdom by force, apparently has merch. There are a bunch of people wearing Kuvira t-shirts, like she's Taylor Swift. It's like a concert. I didn't think about it when I was watching it, but Nadia said it afterwards, and it would not leave my brain. That thought, I was like, that is so true. Why is there Kuvira merch? I'm not complaining. It's just an observation that made me laugh.
Yeah, I didn't notice it, but that's amusing.
Yeah, I mean, do you think Putin is selling merch? Do you think Kim Jong Un is selling T-shirts with his face on it? Like when he travels, he's like, "Here's my merch stand. Buy a mug shaped like my head."
I think we've taken this into political areas we don't really want to enough without talking about those two.
Coming next year, Trump mugs. Hey, he's already tried selling everyone sneakers, so yeah.
Yeah, we know he's a fan of merchandise. He's definitely selling merch, isn't he?
Yeah, he definitely is.
Still one of my mild spoilers, but still one of my favourite storylines that they ever did in Curb, which was where he wore a Make America Great Again hat because it meant people left him alone.
Yes. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. We talked about the consequence of it, but we didn't actually talk about the conversation itself. I just want to give them credit, both the actors and the writers, for the scene where Sue and Kuvira clash. I loved the way their ideologies bumped up against each other in that dialogue exchange. You know, Sue says she didn't want to seize power. Kuvira should step down. Kuvira says no, she did. You know, it's not that Sue didn't seize power; she didn't step up. But Kuvira's like, I did step up. It's just a really good exchange that I just completely butchered in trying to recap it. But like, it was a really good, quite tense back and forth between the two characters. I think both the voice artists doing the work on that and the writers did a great job, and it made for a really good scene. And then my last two quick notes. I don't have anything on the Varric doing Vine shit stuff, but it's definitely an intriguing note to end the episode on.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think both Vine shit and the kids going after them were great. I really enjoyed both of those notes as an ending.
Yeah, and that is my last note, actually. I just wrote down the quote, "You can count on one of us." I don't know about these two ladies. Milo being Milo. Good stuff. I think it's time, Chris.
Let's do it, Dan. It's fine. I'm going to do it.
Let's
trim it up.
Oh, he did it.
I've done it.
I'm going to give you some trivia. So, I love that, like, when we were doing the last series of this, when it was early in the morning, we swapped it round. But I like that you're just at a point now where you're just like, fuck it.
Yeah, what is it? It's 8:12. No, that's still pretty early. It's a Sunday. Oh, well. I've done it now.
So, when we were in Little Bar Sing Se in the fashion mall, there was a plastic version of Bosco present. The bear that the king used to hang around with. And for anyone who doesn't remember, the old king back in the original Avatar had a bear called Bosco, and the joke was, you mean a platypus bear? You mean a walrus bear? No, it's just a bear. Weird. So yeah, Bosco the bear, a little model to him. I saw something recently, actually, where someone speculated that every time we've seen a spirit in the real world, it's had a sort of an animal form, but it's always been a singular animal. But the world of Avatar is full of sort of spliced animals. You know, it's two animals in one, like a wolf owl or whatever. And what I think is really interesting is then that implies that Bosco might not have been a real bear, but a spirit that was just chilling with the king. I think that's quite fun. I hope that's true. It's in my head canon now if it's not real. Love it.
I think it's real. I think that's the case.
Yeah, I like that. So, this is one of my favourite pieces of trivia we've ever had on this show, Chris. And I think this is so good. And I think there's so many things about this that make me laugh. So, during production of the episode, one of the storyboard artists sort of placed a framed photo of Sokka inside Toph's tree dwelling. And a part of me went, that's lovely and sweet and implies things and is kind of sad and tragic, but also really interesting that Toph would specifically have a photo of Sokka, who, you know, the original show teased once or twice that maybe there might be feelings there, but obviously there's an age gap and Sokka was very much with Suki. And I kind of like that they played with that. But then even more amusing, Chris, this was removed because creator Brian Konietzko pointed out that Toph's blind. Why would she have a photo of someone?
Oh man, sorry, I've just swallowed ice I've got ice in my mouth at the wrong moment. But what I love about that is, I was like, oh, that's really sweet, because also he's, at this point he's passed away, so it's a little tribute.
Yeah.
When you first started talking about it, as you clearly did, I also forgot she was blind.
Yeah. Because a part of me went,
oh, that's amazing.
Part of me went, oh, I see why there's conflict, because do you want to put such a point on that? Like, because there's a part of me that was reading that
exactly,
trivia.
yeah.
Because there's part of me reading the trivia when I was reading it originally that was just like, oh, the debate here is going to be, do we want to outright sort of almost soft confirm the Sokka Toph stuff, or to at least Toph's feelings for Sokka. Then, when it was removed for a very different and very much logical reason, why would a blind person need a photo of someone? It's a great point.
The artist and us all made the same mistake, but I still imagine it's Brian, isn't it? It's Bri just being like, fucking hell, is no one paying attention to this show? Like, am I the only one that's actually paying attention here?
It almost feels like a joke from the show. You know, when they used to make jokes where the other characters would forget Toph was blind? Oh, look, there it is what I would say if I could see things. I'm blind, remember? It feels like a joke from the show. It's great. The moment in which the elbow leech clings to Korra recalls a similar scene in the swamp where an elbow leech clings to Sokka when they crash into Foggy Swamp. The designs for the two female fans of Kuvira that Wu meets in the mall, they're actually designed to look like character designers Angela Mueller and Christy Singh. I think that's lovely. That's nice. I like it when they slip, people who work on the show, they borrow their sort of like general features to create sort of an animated version of them for a small scene like that or a background character. I think that's always nice. It's a way to honor the people who tirelessly bring these shows together that almost never get, their names are never really out there. They're in the credits, but who animated this? I don't know. Who drew these pictures? I don't know. Someone they're unsung heroes. So this is a really fun way to recognize them in the actual content of the show. So I always love it when they do that. The script for this episode actually featured the council meeting between Su Yin and the world leaders that she references before she meets Kuvira. It was cut. I think that's probably wise, because I don't think they'd have said anything that isn't said elsewhere in this episode. Obviously, I haven't got that script in front of me. I don't know, but I would have a guess that they will be having debates about the same points that are then brought up when Su confronts Kuvira herself. So probably wise that they cut that for time, in my opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the gag where Mako pulls away Wu, pressed against an alley wall, only for there to be a graffitied poster in the spot where his head had just been, was not in the script, but was added during the storyboarding phase of the episode's production. I think it's a fun gag, and I'm glad they did it. So there you go. That's all the truth.
Yeah, I think it is fun. Yeah, nice. There we go. Should we do the other bit?
Oh, let's do some feedback from last series, Chris.
Let's do it, my friend. Let's listen to, and maybe even respond to feedback from last time.
That was genuinely. Do you remember how last series I built up that you were going to do like a version of the song that you'd like pre-prepared? It was going to be excellent and amazing. That you just did it, but off the cuff. It was great. That's the best one you've ever done.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel like my vocals couldn't handle it. I feel like my breathing needs work.
I'm going to hire Chris, a vocal coach, for next week, everyone. He'll do it again, but he'll nail it. No, that was very, very good. And I'm including, for those who don't know, this is a very long-standing thing, because we used to, on our old podcast, Fringe Observers, many, many years ago, we used to do Quote of the Week, where every week and there was always like, Chris would do a little jingle that always ended with Dan's Quote of the Week, but it was like he'd always do a improvised bit before it. And I genuinely think if we're including all of the Dan's Quote of the Week themes, and all of the previous feedback from last series themes, I still think that was your best one of all of them.
Thank you. That means the world. It really does. Thank you.
You did very well. I appreciated that. Well, am I complimenting that one, or am I shitting on the others? I'll let you decide.
I think once again, Dan, little column A, little column B.
Yeah. I give with one hand, I take with the other. So, this is a comment from Shadow Vanify? It does that thing. I hate this. Shadow Vanify. It does this thing where when I move the YouTube comment into my notes, it underlines the username. So the V could have been a Y that was like cut off by the underline. So I had to genuinely like check that. Sorry, Shadow Vanify. So Shadow Vanify left us a comment on our Venom of the Red Lotus episode, and I think this is just a someone sort of feeding back on something we talked about. So I don't know if you recall this, Chris, but Minghua was electrocuted, and we debated how culpable Mako was in her death. But then, of course, the entire cave she's in collapsed. So even if Mako hadn't killed her, she was dying, so to speak. And we had I don't know if we had a briefish conversation about, like, is Mako a murderer now? This commenter adds, Minghua getting electrocuted is definitely animated in a brutal way, but I think there is room to interpret it as that Mako just knocked her out, and her death occurred when Gazan brought the cave down on himself, since they were all in the same cave system. I think this is my headcanon, because I don't like the idea that Mako murdered, and I agree that is how it can and should be interpreted. I do somewhat still wish they'd have made it clearer, though, so that I could go factually on my way, knowing that Mako didn't just murder her. Is that fair? I agree with Shadow Vanify that is how I've interpreted it and how I would definitely prefer to interpret it. But I do also think the criticism of the episode is still somewhat valid in that I think they could have animated in something or added a line of dialogue or just something to sort of, make me not think Mako was a murderer.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. That's headcanon, and that's great. But having it confirmed in the show, it would have been better.
Yeah. I think so. How you do that quickly without detracting from the brutality of the end of that fight, because obviously the end of that fight was designed to be brutal. Her body just lying there is not fun to look at. And there were obviously lots of brutal deaths last season. And I knew what they were going for with the violence of it. But yeah, I just think some sort of like straight line would have been good. Then again, they deliberately they don't know the cave is collapsing, I suppose. So it would be, I guess you just have them like check her pulse before they leave, and Mako be like, she's unconscious, just leave her. Like, they just go, because obviously they don't know the cave is going to collapse later on. They just think, well, she's unconscious for now, she'll come to and live on or whatever. But yeah, anyway, I guess it muddies things the more you talk about it. But yeah, I just wish they'd done just a little something, or maybe even just shown her like roll over or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you see her go to get up before the cave collapses or something. I don't know.
Oh, there you go. Just a shot of her regaining consciousness, like a minute or so before the cave collapses, and then you could just assume she died in the cave collapse. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, well, you could even animate it in such a way where the cave collapses in front of her, and you don't know for sure that the cave collapsed. And then if they want to bring her back, they can, because they can just say, the rocks fell in such a way that meant she was okay, but also if you then want to go, oh no, she got crushed, you can do that as well.
Yeah, like a quick shot of her regaining consciousness, running towards an opening, and the rocks block her, and then like you just don't know what happens after that. Yeah, that would have been good. Anyway, great comment though. If you would also like to give us feedback that we can talk about, we're going to do a special bonus episode later on after, so I had to explain this every week now, but it's one of those things. This is the last season of Korra, obviously, and what we usually do is we're giving feedback we got from season 3 now during season 4. The season 5 doesn't exist, so what we're going to do is after this is all aired, we'll do a bonus episode where we talk about any feedback. So if you'd like to give feedback for that very episode, that special bonus episode we're going to do, you can do so by heading over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingbutstaticuk. And while you're there, subscribe, like, all that jazz. But if you find the episode in question that we've said something dumb you'd like to correct, just find that episode, head into the comments, and get in there and get amongst it. And we love hearing from you. We are aware we are mostly idiots, so it's absolutely fine if you're just there to tell us how stupid we are or how wrong we got something. Feel free. We love hearing it. Be nice to each other. You can be rude to us, no problem. But yeah, that's the place to do it. You can also get in touch with us via mail at nothingbutstatic.co.uk. We're not always able to respond to all the emails and comments we get, but we do really genuinely read all of them. Also, if you head over to patreon.com/nothingbutstatic, you can leave comments under the episodes as they're posted there, or you, by going on the Patreon, get access to our Discord channel where you can also leave feedback. Some of the feedback I read back, I cover when we do feedback from last series. Is from the Discord also. So yeah, I tend not to respond to Korra stuff in the Discord because I know I'm probably going to talk about it on the podcast. But also, if you've got anything you want to, any thoughts about anything, if it's not Korra or Avatar related, I'll probably reply right there and then in the Discord. So yeah, jump on in, say hi. We appreciate it.
Or someone will. It's a very good community. So chat to others within it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's quieter these days, but it is still a fun little community to join. Obviously, the other benefit of the Patreon, as I mentioned, is getting access to this podcast 1 week early. So if you want to hear us tackle the next episode right now, and you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify or any of those places, you can go over to the Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can hear us discussing The Calling, which is episode 4. That's next week's episode. And that also stays true for our Rewind Review podcast. So that comes out a week early on the Patreon as well. There is bonus stuff. If you've never joined, you'll have access to the first 9 episodes of Nothing But Lyrics. More episodes of that are coming, I promise. We just need to figure out when we do it. We'll probably release a bunch because we've kind of fallen behind. We need to get back on it. So we're probably going to do like 2 a month for a couple months just to sort of catch us back up. And then we'll maybe go back to 1. I've not figured it out yet, but that's coming. We've got to potentially, once we finish Korra and the next series of Rewind Reviews, we're going to have a nice window where we're going to be a lot more relaxed in the sort of, we'll actually have an off season between seasons of Rewind Reviews, and that we can use to sort of catch up on stuff like that. So it will happen. I'm not promising it'll happen anytime soon, but that is something we can do as well. Obviously, please support Raphodraws as well. Rapho spelled Rapho, Raphodraws. They're on Instagram and Tumblr and Twitter and YouTube and all those places. Launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws for a bunch of their artwork. They are the artists who provide that brilliant image of Appa in front of sunset that we use as the key art for this podcast. And it's wonderful. And they've done tons of really great art, and you should go support them. Even if you just go follow them on one of their socials and like some of their posts, that's nice to do as well. So yeah. I think I've covered everything. You got anything to say to the nice people, Chris, before we escape?
No, just thank you for listening, and yeah, like Dan said, we'll see you next time for episode 4.
Perfect. Well, that's been everything for this week. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham,
and we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to discuss. Oh, I've already lost the episode title, Chris. It was just in front of me. What was it called?
The Calling. It's called The Calling.
The Calling. Bye.
Because I remember when you said it, thinking, "Oh, we should do a Nothing But Lyrics on Wherever You Will Go by The Calling." That's how I know that.
Well remembered, because I'd forgotten and I'd already clicked off it, so it was gone.
There we go. I think we need to do it. You know, we hate messy endings. You got to do it again now.
Well, I thought we were going to use that ending and then have this as the post music.
Oh, why not? Hey, post music gang.
You guys stick with us through the music. We love you. Bye. I'd be turning it off. Bye.